Any of these three countries could walk away with gold. China, Uzbekistan, Qatar. It's a really interesting confluence of factors that makes the men's 102 kilogram weight category stacked in a way that we rarely see at Olympic Games.
The next time we see Khudayarov on the lifting platform, that's going to be, all eyes on deck for that one, right? Like, because if he actually calls for a 500 kilogram squat on the bar, what a record that would be.
We live in a world with active conflict on multiple continents right now. And of course, it's going to impact the sporting community. And I think it's important that we highlight some of these sad, sobering, and tragic stories, along with the triumphs that we get to cover on the platform, because these are real people with real multifaceted lives. Hey folks, welcome back to Strength Weekly, the weekly strength roundup that brings you everything you need to know from around the barbell game, and probably some things you don't know. I'm David Thomas Tao. I'm joined by Phil Blackman. We're going to get right into it. First up, powerlifter Zahir Khudayarov squats 490 kilograms raw in training, inching him closer to his goal of being the lightest man to squat 500 kilograms raw. We get into that. We also go lifter by lifter for a stacked Chinese Olympic weightlifting team roster heading into the 2024 Paris Olympics. And some sobering news, Ukrainian weightlifter and Olympic veteran Oleksandr Pielieshenko has passed away during a rocket attack in the Ukrainian-Russian war. We talk a little bit about that, get some reactions from folks close to the Ukrainian weightlifting community. And we also talk about the estimated number of athletes and coaches to have perished in that conflict, one that has perhaps an outsized impact on the sporting community. Phil, let's go right into powerlifting. Zahir has not competed since 2019. Some people thought he was retired. I thought he was retired. One of the most exciting athletes to watch in the strength game. That guy brings the energy every time he steps on the platform. He's clearly not done. At about 125 kilos body weight, he wants to squat 500 kilograms, which would not only be a record in that body weight category all time, it would just be disrespecting the record books at this point. Phil, tell us about his most recent training lift. How's he looking?
So he's looking exceptional. He is definitely not retired yet, because we are on the cusp of him joining an elite club of being able to squat 500 kilograms. And the biggest highlight to me of that, the fact that he's already this close in training, is that if he does it, he would be the first athlete to ever do it outside of the super heavyweight class. Not only is he the lightest ever, but he's actually not even in the heaviest weight category. He's a weight category below it. And that, to me, is the most significant factor of how strong these lifts have actually been in training. So his most recent training lift is 490 kilograms, obviously 10 kilograms away from the 500 kilogram threshold.
Phil, only 3 lifters have ever squatted 500 kilograms or more raw in competition. One name kind of at the top of that list, Dan Bell, all-time world record holder in the total, and a much heavier athlete than Zahir. All these athletes heavier than Zahir, so let's just make that clear.
Khudayarov is the only athlete outside of the super heavyweight division to ever reach the 500 kilogram squat. If he does it on a competitive lifting platform, being in the same conversation as the all-time great Dan Bell you are in GOAT conversation at that point. Zahir already has an incredible resume, but to add this accolade to it at 125 kilos would be, I would argue, one of the biggest highlights on that resume.
Yeah, and I would argue it's one of those marks that we never thought we'd see in powerlifting, or at least I didn't think we'd see in powerlifting at this point under the super heavyweight category. Now he still has to do it on the platform. I do want to point out one fun thing in this progression. His 455 kilo warm-up squat would have been a top 20 heaviest all-time squat on a competitive powerlifting platform. So when your warm-ups would, in theory, place you in the top 20 all-time squats that we've ever seen anyone do raw in powerlifting competition, you're getting into rarefied air. Let's just put it that way.
You are very much an anomaly in the space once you're doing those kinds of lifts that early on in your session. The next time we see Khudayarov on the lifting platform, that's going to be, all eyes on deck for that one, right? Because if he actually calls for a 500 kilogram squat on the bar, granted, that's early in the competition, so he would actually need to also secure his bench press and his deadlift. But he's a pro. He's that's very little doubt that he would bomb out. But what a record that would be.
He just came back 5 years after he last stepped on a platform. Many folks thought he was done, including me, and suddenly all eyes are on him very quickly, which is extraordinarily impressive. And obviously, he stayed in fantastic form. Phil, when is the next time we might see him attempt this 500 kilogram competition squat.
So his next show that we're aware of that he's going to compete in is the Rimini Wellness Experience Show in Rimini, Italy on June 1st. So mark your calendars, June 1st. If he calls for 500 kilograms on the bar, you are not going to want to miss him trying to ascend a weight we have never seen before at that body weight. It will be a check mark, a checkpoint in powerlifting history if he does it.
One thing to point out, the Rimini Wellness Experience on June 1st, it is, as far as we know, a fitness and lifting expo. We are actually not sure what the sanctioning body is for the powerlifting portion of that, or if it is going to be sanctioned. Now, I want to be clear here. This has to be in sanctioned competition from some governing body in order for it to be considered an all-time world record, right? So let's move on to the world of weightlifting. Paris Olympics are coming up. 2024. Seems like just yesterday we were in Tokyo, although it was 2021, technically the 2020 Olympics. It gets confusing. China is sending 6 athletes in weightlifting to the Paris Olympics. The maximum number they can send now. Does that seem like a small group of weightlifters? Yes, it does, because weightlifting has fewer spots at the Olympics this year than it has had in many decades, certainly in our lifetimes. And that is due to all sorts of issues the sport has had at the international level, from doping to corruption. It's a little bit of a slap on the wrist. At one point, we thought the Paris Olympics might be the last time we see weightlifting in the Olympics. Turns out weightlifting spot is secured for the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028, which we like. And hopefully we'll start seeing those athlete counts increase as the number of slots available for Olympic weightlifters at the Olympic Games increases. But anyway, 6 members of the team, 3 men, 3 women. That is a full roster. Phil, who's leading off? Let's start with the men. Who's leading off on the men's side?
Li Fabien, men's 61 kilograms. Now, here's the thing about the Chinese weightlifting team. They're sending a full roster of 6 athletes, but their roster, beyond these 6 athletes, are all gold level caliber Olympic weightlifters. So the fact that these are the 6 that China has decided to send to Paris is a mark that these are the ones they think they're going in and taking home 6 gold. And it's tough to bet against that.
The joke has been in the past, and it's also, there's a lot of truth to it, that the Chinese national weightlifting competition is tougher than the Olympic Games, because China can only send so many lifters to the Olympic Games, and their rosters are so deep in certain bodyweight categories that if they sent, 3 lifters in the men's 61 kilo category, they would all finish, they would finish gold, silver, bronze, right? So the joke is that because there are fewer Chinese lifters in some of these bodyweight categories at the Olympics, it's actually less competitive than Chinese nationals, which is interesting. Li Fabien, 61 kilos. This is a bodyweight category that China has, this range. And let's call it, because the last few Olympic cycles, we've had bodyweight class restructuring, right? This has been a good sweet spot for China. There have been some exceptions, right? It's not like China has won gold in every single category they've sent male athletes to at the Olympic Games, for the past 16 years, but since 2008, it's been darn close to that, is what we'll say. And this is a bodyweight category where China has certainly dominated. Li Fabien has certainly dominated. Phil, what are some recent highlights from Fabien's career to help contextualize his performance?
Yeah, so he's competed 12 times internationally over the last 5 years, and he has won 11 of those 12. So if you're talking about win rate, consistency, stellar on that front.
Moving on, the men's 73 kilo category, we have Shi Ziyang. Now, Shi is recovering from a back injury. I was honestly a little surprised to see him named to this roster. Not surprised, but after we caught wind of the back injury, we were like, ooh, it's not guaranteed that he makes the roster. Seems like recovery from that back injury is going well enough for Team China to think he can take the gold, because China, in these weight categories, especially in these lighter and middle men's bodyweight categories, doesn't really send anyone unless they think they can win, right? So how are we looking for the men's 73s for the Chinese here?
Yeah, so him getting the nod to go, that signals to me that they're confident that he has fully recovered from his back injury and is fully capable of the weights that are expected in order to score a gold medal again for the 3rd time. So I think that while we obviously have to contextualize the fact that he has been recovering from a back injury going into this event, I don't think the team sends him knowing how deep of a roster that they have if they don't think he can actually convert another gold in 2024.
Yes, and just as a great reminder there, Phil, he is the 2-time defending Olympic champion. He would join a small but growing list of weightlifters to potentially win 3 gold medals in a row. One of those lifters, his countryman, Liu Xiaojun, who will not be competing at this games, he did try and make his fourth Olympic Games, but due to doping test positive, was basically disqualified from the running. So we will not see Liu Xiaojun. If you've been hiding under a rock for the last 2 years and you're expecting to see Liu Xiaojun at the Olympics yet again, you won't this time. That's kind of old news, but worth an update. And someone who at 73 kilograms, in these bodyweight categories, again, bodyweight category, restructuring 73, 77, et cetera, Liu Xiaojun really dominated that weight class for over a decade, it seemed. Phil, the third man representing China is in a bodyweight category that the Chinese have not traditionally dominated. That is the men's 102 category, and Liu Huanhua is the Chinese representative. Now, this is a heavier bodyweight category than we've seen the Chinese tend to send to the Olympic Games. This guy, by the way, his nickname online in weightlifting forums, at least in Western weightlifting forums, is Giga Chad. And he is a lifter who, since 2022, has bumped up several weight classes and has performances to match. Phil, how has he been looking over the last couple of years?
Since 2022, Liu has moved up 2 weight classes from 89 kilograms to 102 kilograms, and he has made the podium on all 6 of his international appearances, and he's claimed 2 out of 3 inaugural world records during that span of time. So expect him to face off against a pair of 2020 Olympic champions who have also changed weight classes in order to compete in 2024. In the 102s, it's Uzbekistan's Akbar Djuriev and Qatari Meso Hassona.
We have basically a bunch of lifters here, a trio of lifters who are looking poised for the podium. Now, they're not the only ones who can be competitive here, but they are significantly better from what we've seen recently than the others in that bodyweight category. And it's, again, the rare instance when you have 2 lifters who are Olympic champions from the most recent Olympics competing in the same bodyweight category, and only one lifter can win gold, right? So it's really interesting how this has played out. And suddenly the 102s went from, I got to be honest, in the past handful of years, not a terribly exciting category to me to watch, to perhaps the most exciting men's category. Because on any given day, any of these 3 lifters, any of these 3 countries could walk away with gold. China, Uzbekistan, Qatar, right? These athletes have all performed well at the international level. 2 won gold medals in Tokyo. It's a really interesting confluence of factors that makes the men's 102 kilogram weight category stacked in a way that we rarely see at Olympic Games.
This category seems to be the most impacted by the adjustment of athlete quota from the previous Olympics, because all of these athletes have had to move from their original weight class, which is not featured at the competition, into a weight class that is. And as such, we're seeing 102s get a huge bump from previous years, like you said, of like what to look forward to this time around.
Let's move over to the women. Huo Jihui is the competitor at the lightest women's bodyweight category that will be contested in Paris. It's not the lightest women's bodyweight category, period. But again, we are not going to see every IWF recognized bodyweight category contested in Paris. So the lightest for the women is going to be 49 kilos. Now, interestingly, this is the weight category that also features Team USA's Jordan De La Cruz, who's been looking very good on the platform recently. She is an Olympic veteran, so certainly has her sights set on a potential podium finish after bombing out in Tokyo. But, the Chinese, these lighter women's bodyweight categories, they normally have them locked up. It's worth noting that Team North Korea, their biggest international competition, is not going to be here, which makes me think that the Chinese athlete is certainly the favorite in the 49 kilo category, Phil.
Yeah, I have to echo that. I think that like the North Korean team, they are the ones that have been posting the numbers on the international platforms that could theoretically compete with the numbers that the Chinese team is putting up. But because they're not going to be at the Olympics this time around, it seems like this is more or less a hard lock for the most part. It would be a title defense. It is the expectation. If they do it, congratulations. That's fantastic. If they don't, that would be one of the biggest upset articles we would expect to write.
All right, Phil, who's up next for the women?
So next up, we have Liu Shifeng in the women's 59 kilogram class. She has won 4 gold medals of her 5 subsequent appearances throughout the Paris qualification. I think, arguably, again, the performer that we expect to actually claim the gold at the end of the day.
Yeah, she's got an 80% gold hit rate in international competition over the last few years. I would say this is hardly a lock. Look, none of these are locks, right? Bomb outs exist, right? You got to show up on the platform. A lot can happen. I wouldn't call this as near a certain thing as the women's 49 kilo category, but I would say she's certainly the favorite. And Phil, who is the third and final woman who will be representing China at the 2024 Paris Olympic Games in weightlifting?
We wouldn't be talking about a Chinese weightlifting team if we didn't talk about Li Wenwen in the women's super heavyweight class. She is the premier talent in this weight category over the last handful of years.
In the last 5 years, we've seen Wenwen compete 10 times in major competition. She has won all 10 of those. She is the world record holder across the board in this bodyweight category. I have a lot of trouble seeing her not winning this. I really do.
Yeah, this is where, like, our journalism can only go so deep when all of the data and stats show that it's Li Wenwen across the board at every metric. Like, I mean, if you were to take your easiest call on this roster, it's Wenwen taking the gold again.
All right. Well, Phil, let's move on. We'll stay in the world of weightlifting, but move on to some sad news. Ukrainian weightlifter and Olympic veteran Oleksandr Pielieshenko has passed away. According to multiple sources, he died in a rocket attack during the Ukrainian-Russian war that is currently ongoing in Europe. Phil, what details do we know about Oleksandr's passing here?
So we know that the multiple time European champion, he was 30 years old at the time of his passing. And some of the accolades that we know along the way that he has scored is he won 2 continental titles for Ukraine. He finished 4th in his weight class at the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio, and he died fighting in the Russian-Ukraine war. He was reportedly killed in action, as you said, in a rocket attack on May 5th. That's the date that has been confirmed by multiple sources. I think we should go down some of his career highlights along the way because he did have a stellar resume.
Yes, for sure. A few I'll point out. He finished 4th at the 2015 World Championships. He finished 1st in the 2016 European Championships, 4th at the Olympic Games in Rio in 2016, and he was again European champion in 2017. Brian Oliver, a contributor to BarBend, covered his death and actually got a quote from an official within Ukraine's Ministry of Sport. "This is a very sad loss. Oleksandr loved weightlifting. It was his life. He worked as a coach in Kiev and wanted to compete again. When this war started, he joined the army on the first day." Now, according to sources, Pielieshenko was married but did not have children. Our deepest sympathies go out to Pielieshenko's widow, his family, friends, loved ones, coaches, teammates, everyone impacted by his passing in the Ukrainian and broader European weightlifting communities. The sad reality of international conflict is that it impacts people in all walks of life. And we get to sit here and we get to talk about weightlifting and we get to talk about international competition in a somewhat sanitized way, Phil. We get to talk about this and it's all sunshine and rainbows, right? It's all everyone getting along, international cooperation, etc. That's not the reality of geopolitics these days. And I think it's important for us to recognize within the broader international community of strength sports, we get the luxury of highlighting a lot of the good, but we live in a world with active conflict on multiple continents right now. And of course, it's going to impact the sporting community. And I think it's important that we highlight some of these sad, sobering, and tragic stories, along with the triumphs that we get to cover on the platform, because these are real people with real multifaceted lives. This is not the sort of story we love to see. This is not the sort of story that we'd like to report on because we don't like to see these things happen. But I think it's important that we do, Phil. No one cares what I have to say about geopolitics, nor am I an expert. But I think it's important for us to recognize that tragedies do happen, and these are real people with lives that extend beyond their performance and how much weight they lift.
We have seen this conflict impact many of the sports that we cover, even beyond weightlifting. We saw Alexei Novikov right after the war started when he competed in strongman, and he put up one of the most inspirational performances we had ever seen to a bronze medal finish at the World's Strongest Man competition. We knew that he was competing under the charge of the Ukrainian war in the background, and the fact that he wasn't there. He was also enlisted to help fight, and he had permission to come and compete, and he was the star of that World's Strongest Man competition because of the pressure that he was under to deliver for his country in a way that brought awareness to the boots on the ground there. So the way that sport is able to translate some of the the tragicness of what we see in international conflict, even when we're at a distance from it here in the U.S. Being able to see the athletes that we love to cover, that we love to watch, have to experience what's going on there and bring it over here and translate that a little bit for us to give us perspective of how critical everything that's happening over there is, I think is immensely important that we cover and that we share and that we promote on the platform that we have and the audience that is watching.
And to give a sense of the scale at which this conflict has impacted Ukrainian athletes and Ukrainian sporting culture, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Sport, as of late February 2024, so this stat is outdated. We're months beyond this. Around 443 Ukrainian athletes and coaches have died during the conflict. That's nearly 500 people. And it's sad to say that, that stat is several months outdated. It's likely that they've crossed that threshold of 500 coaches and athletes in the Ukrainian sporting system who have died during this conflict. So we don't really have an upbeat way to end Strength Weekly this week. But I think that as we prep for Olympic coverage, as we prep to cover weightlifting at the 2024 Paris Olympics, it's important to note that international sport is not in this bubble. It's not in a protected, snow globe that gets to exist outside of broader factors in the world, especially when it comes to international athletes and competition. I think it's important for us to recognize that. So our hearts go out to, Pielieshenko's, like I said, his family, loved ones, former training partners, coaches, and to the entire Ukrainian sporting community right now.
Yeah, we will be covering the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, of course, but there is the backdrop behind those games and on any international competition where countries from across the globe are coming to compete together in sport, that there will be the backdrop of those conflicts while that competition is going on. And to remain aware of all that, to keep yourself updated on what's going on during those conflicts, I think is immensely important, even though we get a reprieve of it, so to speak, while we're watching the sports that we love to watch and that we love to cover. It's important to not lose sight of what's going on.
Yeah, and also, just to be clear, this Olympic Games is happening in Europe, in Paris, while there is active war in Europe. Eastern Europe, it seems far away, but there is not peace on the continent while the Olympic Games is happening. And I think that is something that's all too easy to lose sight of. And this is a good reminder for us as journalists, as broadcasters, to not lose sight of that. So, Phil, thank you for joining me today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be bringing you more action from Strength Weekly and from around the world of strength next week.